Welcome to the Plant-Free MD podcast with Dr. Anthony Chaffee, where we discuss diet and nutrition and how this affects health and chronic disease, and show you how you can use this to optimize your health and happiness, both mentally and physically. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Plant-Free MD podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Anthony Chaffee, and today I have a very special guest, Dr. Nelson Vazquez, who is joining me from the East Coast of America. So thank you, Dr. Vazquez, for coming on at such a late hour. Really appreciate your time.
You're welcome. I'm happy to be here with you.
Very good. So you have quite an incredible story about your life and how you came to changing your diet and changing your health in a lot of ways. And actually a very interesting story on how you came to medicine in the first place and how that eventually led you to what you're doing now. For people that haven't come across you before, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to a ketogenic carnivore diet?
So I'll give you the shortened version, then we can talk about details. But this year, later in the year, it will be 40 years since I graduated from medical school. Mm-hmm. I did my residency family medicine. Went to medical school in Puerto Rico, did my family medicine residency in New York, then lived in Massachusetts, and I've been in Florida for 28 years. I'm a family practitioner. I have done a lot of temporary work over the years. So I've worked in, I think, like 90 to 100 different places, different military bases I've never served. Done emergency medicine, internal medicine, pediatrics, but I'm a family physician, so most of my time has been in primary care. How did I decide to be a doctor? Goes back to my childhood. I had a brother who had epilepsy, and from the age of 3, I used to tell him I was going to be a doctor to cure him. He died when he was 8. I was not quite 6 years of age. I was introduced to death and dying, I think, at an early age with that. But I kept my promise to be a doctor. So that's why I do what I do. And I'm 64 now, and I'm still working, seeing patients. I'm in a primary care practice setting right now. I've heard that if you choose to do something that you like, you'll never work a day in your life. And most days I feel like that.
Yes.
But I was 320 pounds, I don't know, 31, 35 years ago. My weight has fluctuated over the years, developed diabetes, hypertension. I had a stroke 6 years ago. Lumbar spinal stenosis with an neurogenic claudication a couple of years ago. I was almost in a wheelchair, was falling and using a cane and using electric carts everywhere I went. And about 20 months ago now, I decided, okay, I got to do something. I've been familiar with ketogenic diets since the 90s when I read my first Dr. Atkins book. I think probably a lot of us were introduced that way. And I was so hook, line, and sinker. Mm-hmm. I gave for 30 plus years since then. I've given low carb advice, but I wasn't following it myself. Mm-hmm. All the time. I was born in Puerto Rico. Our diet growing up was mainly rice and beans every day. And then there will be other roots, liver of chicken, liver of steak. But that was primarily it. Ate a lot of veggie meats, fake meats, growing up. Mm. And over the years, the amount of processed foods in my diet increased exponentially. I think there was barely a McDonald's where when I was growing up. And of course, we have one in every corner.
Mm.
So I've always struggled with the weight. Every time I wanted to lose some weight, I knew how to do it. I just cut the carbs and, lost 40 pounds and then regained them when I abandoned
Mm.
the way of eating. So 1.5 years ago, I said, no, I got to do something. Not even the stroke was motivation enough, by the way. Even after the stroke, I was still 305 to 310 pounds. And so I started with going low carb and then became more strict keto. I lost the first 45, 49 pounds, I think, with that. But after June 12th, when my eye doctor told me I had developed macular edema, which, by the way, was not from the diabetes, even though you could blame the diabetes for 29 years being diabetic.
Mm-hmm.
I had my eye exams regularly, and I did not have that. At that time, I had been already a year and a half on Trulicity, which is one of the GLP-1 drugs, same family as Ozempic and Wegovy and all those.
Mm-hmm.
I believe Trulicity is dulaglutide. It's one of the listed side effects of all of them. Macular edema, retinal problems. It also gave me gastroparesis or gastroparesis, depending on where you're from, on how you pronounce it. But my A1C before I started that medication and almost 2 years later had not changed. It was the same. So it didn't help me for my diabetes. It was 6.7, which, few words below 7, you're okay. Which is not exactly true, but before and after the Trulicity, 6.7. It had not helped me with the weight because it wasn't until I changed my amount of carbohydrates per day when I started losing the weight. But after that diagnosis, my daughter-in-law was pregnant. And I said, no, I want to see my grandson. So just 2 weeks later after that, I said, I'm going carnivore. I was peripherally aware that some people have done that. I knew about Jordan Peterson and his daughter and Joe Rogan. And at the time, I thought these people are crazy. I didn't know about Dr. Chaffee or Dr. Baker then following that lifestyle. And when I started this is right after my diagnosis with the macular edema, started looking for information, YouTube and online. I said, I'm going to do that. I ran across a video from Kerry Mann, Homestead How on YouTube, where he was interviewing someone who had lost a lot of weight, but he had also improved mental health, depression, anxiety, and all those things. And I didn't take me much because I was already eating very low carb. When I took it seriously, it's a simple thing. You have a plate, you have some meat and some vegetables, and you stay away from the grains, the potato, the roots, and the sugar. It's simple.
Mm-hmm.
Probably until not too far away back, I was one of those doctors that would say, well, you cannot never reverse diabetes. You can manage it, right? I am sold completely on not that, that not being the case. So on the third day or fourth day, when I started eating mostly meat, main thing I eat is beef. Sometimes I buy some goat and some lamb, and I eat fish maybe once a month. I buy a liver every couple of months and I cut it in pieces. That's my multivitamin. But after 3 or 4 days, I woke up one day and I'm not hungry. I said, I'm not going to eat today. 48 hours went by and then I had another meal, but I haven't looked back. I don't get hungry. I don't have cravings. I do drink coffee sometimes. We were in Austin, Texas. I told you not to take my card away for that. I've had a couple of pickles and some avocado sometimes. Very rarely. I mean, mostly being beef, some chicken sometimes. My wife and my oldest son, who lives with me still, prefer to have more chicken, but they eat the beef. Usually they cook, so when I cook, it's usually beef and occasionally some chicken. But I have lost about 120 pounds since my heaviest.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
And
my A1C, by the way, which had not changed for years, it was about the same level, is 5.4. I just bought an A1C at Walmart because you can buy them over the counter. The kid that I bought had two. So my wife and I both did the A1C last week. It was 5.4. It's been 5.4 now. I had that done in December. It was 5.4. It's been steady there. I had been using 300 units of insulin a day.
Wow.
And I know that even endocrinologists who deal with this stuff every day don't have many patients on 300 units a day. I manage diabetes all the time, and I can rarely. I mean, I know I had one guy one time who was really having to have almost that much. But if I wanted to eat, even if it was not junk food, if I wanted to eat my typical Puerto Rican diet, and I wanted to have some roots, some yuca, malanga, yautía, all those are roots that we eat in the Caribbean. Wanted to have my rice and beans, even if I had some meat with it, or I had to use. It wasn't every day 300, but up to 300 very often, because I would adjust. I knew how much something was going to increase my blood sugar. So I went down to zero. I have gone 5 months without insulin. Not a problem, but my C-peptide is low. And I think in December, my insulin was 1. So I'm not excreting or injecting a lot of insulin, but the C-peptide was low. So my pancreas is tired of this business. So I use 10 units of long-acting a day still. But hypertension, which was the cause of my stroke in 2018, I was using up to 300 milligrams of metoprolol. And most patients don't even get to 200. Usually you start at 25 and then you adjust it. Well, I was using 300 milligrams of metoprolol, and I was using 40 milligrams of lisinopril, which is the maximum dose. And I had to slowly taper off that as well. My blood pressure, the last time I checked that, I think it was 115 or something like that. Mm-hmm. One day I was not feeling well, so I got to work and asked the nurse to please check my blood pressure. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't feeling well. It was 130, which is still a normal number, but so I don't need that anymore. had surgery 37 years ago, and haven't had complications from the surgery, by the way. Neurosurgeon said, I'm going to do a simple laminectomy. It was L4 and 5, I believe, and not going to do a fusion. Thank God he didn't. So I haven't had complications from the surgery, but of course, carrying that weight, my back has always, hurt me. And I did have some damage in one of my roots, and I can't remember if it was L5, S1, but I always, if I got a lot of back pain, sometimes I would get some radicular pain. Anti-inflammatories, muscle relaxants, use them often. Past year and a half, I've used maybe twice some diclofenac and maybe twice baclofen. I'm pain-free. I have I have a C6, and I knew it was C6. So I started having numbness in my thumb, and in my shoulder, not in my neck, but it severe arthritis, C6 severely pinched. I have no pain. So neck and back are bad, but asymptomatic from that. Omeprazole, Prilosec, Zantac, throughout my lifetime, Pepcid. I don't need medication for reflux. Plantar fasciitis for over 30 years. Don't have it anymore. I always wear an insert on my shoes. Been wearing them for over 30 years because it will come back frequently. And when that thing hurts, it hurts. Completely gone.
Nice.
I've gotten things that sometimes I had a toenail fungus for a few years. Out of my 10 toes, one of them always the same, had some dystrophy, and I even had taken some pictures to send it to a podiatrist friend of mine. So I went back and checked and compared to now, completely gone. Toenail fungus, a little bit of eczema. There are things I can't remember. They have gotten better.
Yeah, nice. That's really good. And so when exactly did you make the switch, and what was the sort of the catalyst to say, okay, today's the day? Because obviously you'd been exposed to Dr. Atkins and all this. You'd actually seen it work in your patients. And what was that light bulb moment for you and said, okay, I need to do this for myself?
So two things from what you said. Had always been my advice for a long time. When I have patients, especially, I've always worked in areas where I had a lot of patients that were Hispanics, wanted to speak to someone who spoke their language. My advice had been the same: cut the rice, the beans, the potatoes, the roots. Central Americans use a lot of tortillas, Mexican, and everyone in Central America. And it's like saying a bad word to us, I should say. What do you mean I can't have rice and beans, or I can have tortillas? And you cut all that, no bread, no pasta, stick with the vegetables, green leafy vegetables and non-starchy vegetables, eat whatever meat you want. And I've seen results from 15 A1C go down to 6 in 3 months.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not even taking years, just in 3 months, but only when they have followed that advice. So I wasn't following that advice as strictly as I should have. So it was when they diagnosed me with the macular edema, and my daughter-in-law was pregnant, I said, I want to see my grandchild, and it's not going to be because of this. And I knew what I needed to do. So that was the incentive and the why. I
Mhm.
had had a stroke already at the time, was 5 years before that.
Mhm.
And I'm a little bit ashamed to say, not even that
Mhm.
had made me do it. My neurologist, by the way, he said, your, your A1C 6.7, I want it lower. I want you to go below 6. That was my neurologist. My cardiologist, both great doctors,
Mhm.
but my cardiologist just keep your LDL under 70. You'll be fine.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah. So probably went
so
the other way
that
with
that
that.
was what turned the switch.
Yeah, good. Hey everyone, really happy to announce a new sponsor for the show and for everybody down in Australia, Stockman Steaks, who are delivering high quality grass fed and finished pasture raised beef and other meats, flash frozen and vacuum sealed to your door, something that I've been enjoying a lot of myself recently as well. They also have a great range of specialty items such as high fat keto mince and carnivore beef and organs mince with liver, kidneys, and beef heart as well. So use code Chaffee today for a free order of beef mince or another specialty gift along with your order at stockmansteaks.com.au, and I'll see you over there. Thanks, guys. Yeah, that was the thing. You mentioned that you knew which foods were going to make your blood sugar spike, and so you need more insulin. You know, the information is right there in front of us because a lot of people have to do that, and you can sort of like reverse engineer a diet that's going to keep your blood sugar low and keep your insulin demand pretty low as well. And we don't think about that because we're taught as doctors and then as patients, doesn't matter how much carbs you need, just use the appropriate amount of insulin. And of course that's a recommendation coming from the insulin manufacturers because they want you to eat a whole bunch of carbs so you take a lot of insulin because that's their product that they're selling. And so no, 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 that's totally fine. You want to take just eat any carbs you want. You don't have to change anything. Just make sure you get enough insulin. And that would be fine if it were only the case that if insulin only drove energy into cells, but it has over 100 different affects over 100 different processes in the body. And so when that goes up because you're injecting 300 units of insulin a day, everything's getting out of balance. And obviously that's not necessarily something you want. And so it's so interesting that we have this information right in front of us, and yet we eat certain things and insulin demand goes down, HbA1c goes down, diabetes goes down, and yet there are people still saying has nothing to do with diet. You can't control it. This is just a disease that is a progressive disease. It doesn't go away, and the information is right there in front of us. Isn't that? I think it's the
Yes.
funniest
And
thing.
my new analogy in the past year and a half with patients is, well, imagine you have a bathtub and you are filling it with water, and the water is blood sugar, you know, glucose. And you fill the bathtub, but starts overflowing. That's diabetes.
Mhm.
And most patients, when I ask them what causes the diabetes, 100% of them tell me, oh, how much sugar I eat.
Mhm.
Well, everything turns into sugar mostly,
Mhm.
but they are pretty clear that the diet is important. So I have a bathtub, it's getting full, starts to overflow. And I have about 10 different tools because we have like 10 different groups of medications for diabetes that can be used. When I graduated from medical school, metformin wasn't even in the market.
Mhm.
It was only the oral hypoglycemics, the second generations, because the first generations were in the 60s, but I only had the second generation hypoglycemics available. Metformin came a few years after I think I finished residency. And
Mhm.
after that, you just had insulin. But nobody told me in medical school that diabetes type 2 was a problem with too much insulin already.
Mhm.
So what I tell patients is now I have about 10 different medications or groups of medications I can give you. It's better to start poking holes, taking a drill, poking holes in the bathtub to empty it,
Hmm.
or maybe is it better just to turn the faucet off?
Mm. Yeah, true.
And they get it. Okay, well, it's kind of simple. You stop eating what's causing the blood sugar to go up, and eventually things come down, and we still need to have a little bit of glucose, but there's no essential carbohydrates.
Hmm.
There are essential fats and essential proteins, but no essential carbohydrates. Your body will make what it needs,
Hmm. Yeah.
and so that's been now my approach with diabetes with the patients. Unless you get a patient that when they walk into the office, you do a blood sugar, it's 400, 500.
Hmm.
Usually I get them with doing a fasting blood sugar. It's maybe a little bit over 200, or it's not even that, but the A1C is already 6.5 or 7. And studies have shown that even on males,
Hmm.
once you hit 5.7,
Mm.
that curve starts to go up of complications from diabetes.
Mm.
And on the same study, on women, 5.9 started to spike the number of diabetes complications. So you're not diabetic only when you get to 6.6, 6.5. You're diabetic really before that.
Yeah.
So hopefully it will have better impact than just starting someone. I mean, I will add things like metformin and uh, probably start with that and other medications. But the main emphasis is on the amount of carbohydrates that you put through your mouth.
Yeah. Absolutely. So at this point, is that your sounds like that's your main approach? How many patients have you treated in that way, and what have your results been?
So right now, I might see. I mean, it's an epidemic. It's a pandemic, really. When you look at the numbers of diabetes, fatty liver, which not all patients are diabetics, but they've gone up. Diabetes, obesity, fatty liver, and about 30 other things that can be blamed on the carbohydrate and hyperinsulinemia and insulin resistance, and whether you believe on insulin resistance and hyperinsulinemia being separate entities or the same thing. Uh, it all depends on the patient's wanting to do it. Because the moment I mention to patients, you have to really remove this food group, and they happen to like that food group,
Mhm.
whatever it is, whether it's the bread or the pasta. Oh my God, I have to stop eating that. I'd rather die. I've had
That's the option.
I've had that at least twice to that extreme. I'd rather die. I said, well, then get ready for that because we're gonna make it easier.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the success basically has depend on who listened. I continue to have patients who come back and they're much better, but it all depends on the degree to what you do is where you go with the restriction. And a lot of people talk about it being a restrictive diet, whether you're trying to do 20 or 30 grams per day, or I don't tell my patients I'm carnivore from the moment they walk in.
Mhm.
A few of them get that information as they're walking out because
Mhm.
our conversation got us there. But I always for most things, tell them about a low carbohydrate diet and why. I've been recently. patient had lost 30, 40 pounds. I said, wow, that's good. How you do that? And he says, I went carnivore.
Mhm.
I said, okay, good.
Nice. Yeah.
And everybody doesn't have to do the same. Yeah, I've been listening to you for a while now, and I know what you eat and what you recommend to a lot of your patients. But some patients don't want to go
Mhm.
to where I've gone. And okay, well, let's try to do it this way. I try to meet them where they are. I've had, as a matter of fact, I have a cousin right now who is on a low carb vegetarian diet.
Mhm.
Well, at least
Yeah.
at least she's trying to be low carb.
Mhm.
And it's interesting because she is a physician. She's been an obstetrician for longer than I've been a doctor as well. And she was doing an Atkins diet when I was like 18.
Mm.
That's the first time I actually that were exposed to that. I just didn't know why. Years later, I did read the Atkins, one of his books. But right now, at least she's being low carb. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, the advice depends on how well the patient takes it, believes it, or what
Mhm.
complications have they had. I've had patients come to the office with amputated toes,
Mm.
and uh, the approach now includes this. Listen, before before I tell you what I'm going to say, I'm not trying to shame you, but I want to show you where I was and where I am right now, and I'm still, considered by BMI tables. Think I'm 31, still considered obese, but I'm still wearing the same belt that I was wearing 20 months ago.
Mhm.
And it happens to have holes all around the
Mm.
belt. Right now, it's reaching the middle of my back. So I
Yeah.
can show
Nice.
them that. And on my phone, I have my pictures. So, you know, I'm not trying to shame you, but all this could have been avoided with a different diet. So if you're willing to do this, then we can work on that. If not, I also use traditional medicines. There are some patients who just want to get a pill and go home
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
continue to eat
Garbage.
whatever they want, and they cover the meal with whatever, the medicines or. So I'm more selective on choosing medication for patients.
Mhm.
I think this week I even offered to put someone on Ozempic.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Special circumstances, but uh, his A1C was like sky high, and his fastings, blood sugars were over 200. So I was going to actually switch him off from some of the medicines he had, including insulin. Anyways,
Mhm.
so I can use still some medications, but particularly for fatty liver, obesity, diabetes. I'm not an obstetrician, but as a family medicine doctor, I do have training in obstetrics and gynecology. Actually, I between medical school and residency, I deliver over 50 babies.
Yeah. Nice.
So I deal with women's health and PCOS, and so I also advise
Mhm.
on the diet and the why. I explain why because you go to the doctor and the doctor doesn't tell you anything and writes you a prescription for something. Very often the patients walk out and they have no idea why he gave me that medication or why he wants me to do this.
Mhm.
Lose weight and move more and go home. It's frequently the advice we get, right? So I try to explain to the patients why I'm suggesting what I'm suggesting, and you can go home and do it or not. I'm not your daddy. I'm not going to follow you home and tell you you have to do this or that. But I do explain why. If they don't do it, well, I told them why this was better and what they could avoid and how they can improve. If they don't do it, then it's up to them.
Yeah. And that sort of, brings us to the other sort of point that it's not just diabetes and sequelae from diabetes like PCOS that this can help. There's a lot of other things that can help as well. What has your experience been with other sorts of illnesses and issues, chronic disease issues, and your patients, and how has this helped, and in what ways?
Well, again, when I went to medical school, they told us 95% of patients with hypertension. We had no idea what caused it, right? And most of those 95% are because of hyperinsulinemia.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had the greatest example because I was using 300 milligrams of metoprolol, which is a very high dose.
Yeah.
40 milligrams of lisinopril. Gave me a stroke. Mm-hmm. Yes, in combination with having my triglycerides. I went back and checked what my triglycerides were just before the stroke, like the year before I had a lab test. They have always been high. They fluctuated from 150 to 300 something. And yeah, my triglycerides have always been on the higher side. My HDL had never been past 40. It was always in the 30s. And my LDL was also a little bit high, but looking back through my labs and what I had recently, so my triglycerides are in, I think, 70. My HDL for the first time in my life over 40 at 49. Still haven't had a 50, but I'm hoping it will get there. So my triglycerides are low. HDL, it's higher than it's been. My LDL, I'm making my cardiologist happy because it is under 70. But yeah, the numbers are pretty good. Mm-hmm. And so we have to treat patients for hypertension, but if they understand that diet, it matters. And we've always given the advice of the low salt, mm-hmm. which is interesting because I was a low salt eater since the age of probably 10, mm-hmm. because my mother had hypertension and her doctor told her low salt. And my mother followed, mm-hmm. to the detriment of her health. And unfortunately, she passed away 21 years ago. She should not have died at 67 of a heart attack, with uncontrolled diabetes. That's another story, but she cooked low salt in the house. So I was used to not eating salt, not adding salt. Now I see I was just cooking a beef belly, by the way, mm-hmm. which I did in the oven, low and slow. So that's tomorrow's meal, because it's too late to eat now. Mm-hmm. All right. But I put a bunch of salt on the meats I cooked, and I have no problems. It used to be that if I had a salty meal, which would have been probably French fries with too much salt or other foods, my blood pressure would go up. So the advice is good, if you're having a huge amount of carbohydrates in your diet, well, you have to adjust something to help with the blood pressure. Someone has congestive heart failure, you don't want them to eat too much salt, but all these things do improve with a low carb diet.
Mm.
And then you can add the salt.
Mm-hmm.
Other, things like reflux. I developed, by the way, B12 deficiency because I was for a long time using PPIs and the omeprazole and lansoprazole, Santex. I mean, I've used them all from the moment they came out. So low B12 because it wasn't getting absorbed. And on top of that, metformin also causes B12 absorption problems. So even though most of my life, I've had a good amount of meat, turkey, chicken, beef. It wasn't probably as much as I do eat now, but I was consuming enough vitamin B12 in my diet, just having two medications that were blocking the absorption.
Yeah.
So I ended up I have numbness and tingling from the stroke on my right side. I had on the same side numbness and tingling from my pinched nerve. I had worsening neuropathy, and then we discovered it was because the B12 was low. And I also had a diabetic neuropathy. So I had 4 different reasons causing. To this day, I still have a little bit of numbness and tingling, but it's a lot better.
Good.
So having been through many of those things, of course, I think it helps the patients know, you've gone through it. Okay, so tell me what you did. So I have lots of stories about different things that I use with. I tell my patients I don't have any problem. But I should have probably never gotten any of those things if I had heard better things in medical school. I was taught what at the time was the supposed evidence, at least. Anyways, I use a lot for a lot of different things. Of course, more than half the patients I see are diabetics, and more than half have diabetes and hypertension, and so those 2 are the most common things. And nowadays, the fatty liver, I would say 15 years ago, the only liver problems I saw were the result of alcohol. And maybe 15, maybe 20, but not even 20 years. This has been past 15 to 18 years. The amount of fatty liver has skyrocketed. And the only patients I've seen in the past 10 years that had any liver transplant, not even from viral hepatitis, which can cause damage and you could end up having to need a liver transplant. But the only liver transplant patients I've seen, which I never see and a lot anyways, are from fatty liver, non-alcoholic fatty liver. Alcohol and sugar and fructose cause the same damage in the liver. So, but used to be that I could assume the patient was drinking. If those enzymes were elevated and we saw changes in the liver, it was always alcohol, not for the past 15 to 18 years. It's the numbers. I think those are real pandemics: diabetes, obesity, fatty liver, and a bunch of other things that come along with hyperinsulinemia.
Hey guys, just want to take a second to thank our sponsor at Carnivore Bar. I don't promote many products because honestly, all you need to be healthy is to just eat meat. For those times that you're out hiking, road tripping, or stuck at work and you want a nutritious snack that is just meat, fat, and salt if you want it, the Carnivore Bar is a great option. So I like this product not because it's just pure meat, but also because I want the carnivore market to thrive as well. And the more we support meat-only products, the more meat-only products there will be available in the mainstream. So if this sounds like something you'd like to get behind, check it out using my discount code Anthony to get 10% off, which also applies to subscriptions, giving you 25% off total. All right, thanks guys. Yeah, yeah. Well, that's great that you've been able to help so many people with that as well. And the neurological issues are something that's particularly interesting because these are things that we get taught and that we teach our patients and tell our patients that at a certain point, you do the surgery and you're going to get recovery up till maybe a year or two on the outside, and after that, it's just whatever's there is permanent. It's never going to get better. And a lot of the times the damage is permanent because nerves are very, very delicate structures and they may not be able to recover and heal. And yet, you've had these neurological issues for a number of years and very good reasons for them. Like the neurogenic claudication from the spinal stenosis, where the nerves are just too tight and bunched up, so they're getting undue pressure on them, and they can get permanent damage and pain from that. And and then all of a sudden it's not a problem. And like you said, you may not have had those problems in the first place and may not have suffered with those issues at all or needed surgery at all. But the great news is that even though you have, you're able to recover from that. And that's something that is just really unheard of in spinal surgery circles. It's just like that just doesn't happen. After a couple, after a year or two, that's thought to be that's your going to be your permanent neurological status, and it might get worse, but it's certainly not going to get better. It's just that that's what your lot is. And now all of a sudden we're seeing people recover from very long-term chronic issues without surgery, or even after surgery they still have lingering symptoms, and then they get resolution of those symptoms. I've even seen people, Dave Mack is a gentleman I had on my podcast. He has a YouTube channel as well talking about carnivore. He had a subarachnoid hemorrhage 30 years ago, so a form of stroke, a hemorrhagic stroke 30 years ago, and he had sort of permanent neurology. He had a right-sided weakness, quite severe, to the point that he walked with a limp, a pronounced limp, had a lot of weakness in his right hand, and very unstable on his feet, had a lot of falls, very difficult for him to go up and down stairs. He had to really cling on to the rail with his left hand, his good hand, in order to go up and down stairs safely without falling. And he had done Atkins, he had done sort of versions of keto diets early on. And we do know now that ketogenic diets are very beneficial for neurological recovery, especially from things like traumatic brain injuries and concussions, but just injury to the brain and nervous system. But now 30 years later, he goes on a carnivore diet specifically, not just ketogenic, but carnivore. And in a couple of months, he starts seeing resolution and improvements in his motor function of his right arm and leg. And now all of a sudden he's not limping anymore. He's walking normally. His wife points this out and they say, "Whoa, really? Like, videotape me." And he's just walking normally. He's like, I can't believe it. I'm walking normally. Now he runs up and down stairs. And he was just so blown away by this condition that he lived with for 30 years is now gone. And he still has some residual weakness. It's not exactly as strong as his left side, but functionally it's there. You can't see a deficit unless you did a focused neurological exam.
So my stroke was 6 years ago now.
Hmm.
In September will be 6 years. But I still had some weakness on my right side.
Hmm.
I'm right-handed. It was a left-sided stroke. And I always had, since the stroke, I've had weakness on the right side. Improved a lot in the first few weeks. Not with medicine, by the way. It was an electromagnetic frequency machine that I bought, which had very good results. Basically, the improved circulation, but I still had weakness. Initially, for a few weeks until the EMF treatment started, I was walking with a walker, and I have video and pictures of that. And then after that, it started to improve. But I still, up until last year, I still had weakness on my right arm and leg. I can't notice any difference anymore. Now, I can run. If I try to run, I would notice a little bit of a limp. And this weekend, in Orlando, Dr. Kiltz and I and other people were going to go and eat. And Dr. Kiltz is hyperactive and he's always running. And, so he's trying to run through the lobby. I said, hold on, I can't run as fast as you. But I don't feel the difference in between my right hand and my left hand anymore. The strength has improved, has definitely improved. I'm sleeping without my CPAP machine for the first time in 30 years.
Yeah, wow.
And my son the other day, I was taking a nap. I got home from work and still was early. So I lay down in bed and fell asleep without my machine because it was in a suitcase. I didn't want to open it. Mm. And he came to tell me because everybody in the house knows if I fall asleep and stop breathing, it end up not being good for me. So I probably have had, besides this past few weeks, I probably have had only 5 nights in 30 years I didn't sleep without the machine.
Wow.
Because I can. It's just I would wake up basically oxygen deprived, didn't sleep well. Anyways. And he came close to me and he noticed I wasn't even snoring. I said, okay. He left. Then he told me afterwards what happened. So I'm able to sleep without my CPAP machine for the first time in 30 years. The brain, there's still a scar there where I had the stroke, and I still have a little bit of balance problems, but I no longer need to use even a cane. I'm able to bend down and not fall, which has happened in the past. So that is better. And the brain seems to need even more carbohydrate restriction because, like I said, when there are ketones around, right? Mm-hmm. So I wish I knew that in the 60s to help my brother, and then come to find out that people did know, doctors did know in the 60s about ketogenic diets for epilepsy, for nothing else.
Yeah. Especially for
but when the drugs came out, they stopped using that.
Yeah. That's pretty unfortunate. It is a shame that that with pharmacology, and I practice Western medicine as well, and I prescribe things for my patients when it's necessary, but it's so much less necessary than we realize, and that these medications can be very beneficial and life-saving in many cases, but they shouldn't just be the first line treatment and the only line of treatment. That it's just medication.
Exactly. That doesn't have to be the only line. Even if you have to use them, and this applies also to the newfound knowledge on psychiatry, metabolic psychiatry, right? Some of those medications still will need some of those patients will still need some medications, but this is a powerful tool. Mm-hmm. I mean, for many things. And it seems everything brain related, nervous system related, responds even better than other systems to carbohydrate restriction.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's something that I'm really glad to see you and other doctors coming onto this and understanding, hey, this, because I think vast majority of doctors do actually want to help their patients and want to use the best tools available. But it's just that, we have this idea that if it was worth knowing about, it was taught to me in medical school or residency. And that's not always the case. And maybe it's people's best effort, but maybe it's not actually always the best thing. And that's the famous Harvard graduating address to the graduating class in the 1930s, where they said,
Dr. Osler.
was it Osler saying that?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Well,
You're better.
I've seen it attributed to the two different people, but
Yeah.
If you search also, it's attributed to Dr. Osler. But go ahead. I'm sorry. I do.
No, you're fine. Yeah. Well, it was just that, it was just that statement that, half of the things that you learned here are going to turn out to be wrong, but no one's ever going to tell you which half. You have to figure that out.
Because we don't know which half.
You don't know exactly. So we taught you because we thought it was right, but it's not. And we're gonna move on from there. And which is funny to me that we forget that. And they say, no, but this was taught. How can you say something different than what everybody else is saying? I was like, well, we know that most of our understanding is a work in progress, and so we have to build and work on these sorts of things, and then some of it's just going to be wrong. I mean, this is so funny. People say, well, if it were wrong, they wouldn't have put it in the guidelines. Then why do they change the guidelines every 5 years? Think about that. So the guidelines are infallible. So, but we changed them from last time. And then we changed them from the time before that, and the time before that, and the time before
So
that.
if they were right at the beginning, then
it was right. It was right.
Shouldn't have been changed, or maybe we always come to a new understanding. That's the way science should work.
Yeah.
Okay. Without mentioning the topic, we were talking off camera about exactly that. I mean, that's the way science works. We have new understanding all the time, and we need to be flexible with that understanding. Just look at the numbers and the science. Don't get offended if what your position was 5 years ago or a year ago happens to be wrong. We need to accept.
Yeah.
It's difficult. It's a human nature not to want to accept that you're wrong, right?
Yeah. Well, and also that you may have been doing something that could have harmed people. Obviously, because that goes against it's like, no, hold on, I'm helping people. I'm doing it. It's like, yeah, well, look, you are, and you're using the best information that you had available to you at the time. But things get better. And if you don't accept that things can get better and improve, then you're going to continue doing what you did before, which may not have been as good. It maybe was the best thing at the time, but it's not necessarily the best thing at the time now. And so we need to remember that. And just like, you wouldn't, when other things come out and you say, oh, this is the new technology, this is the new surgical procedure, this is the new medication. Okay, well, I'm going to change to that because that's better. That's an improvement on what we were doing before. Well, this is the same thing. This is just an improvement on what we were doing before. And it helps people get off medications and not need the medications in the first place. And so it doesn't have to be an attack or an assault on us as clinicians or even as patients. It's just, hey, we have more understanding now, and it's great to see more and more people becoming aware of that and applying this to their patient base as well. It's great to see.
Well, at least it is a little bit easier nowadays because of social media and platforms like this. Because when I was in medical school a long time, and probably even when you went to medical school, if you wanted to find information about something, you didn't open Google, YouTube, or ChatGPT. You had to go to the library and pick up a book that was already 10 years behind.
Yeah.
Right? Because it wasn't, off the press. Even off the press a year, a book was 2 or 3 years behind. Nowadays, you have a lot more information. So I don't mind people coming and saying, doctor, I found this. Sometimes the interpretation of this may not be what the patient thought it was, but, I don't mind people telling me, Dr. Google said this.
Oh
But
yeah. Yeah.
nowadays, there's so much more information, so much easier to find. Uh, to maintain your license, you have to have a certain number of continuing medical education credits, right? And
Mhm.
you're always trying to make sure you have enough. I usually have more than what is mandatory because
Mhm.
I like finding more
Mhm.
information, but 99% of that information is usually sponsored by
Yeah.
a pharmaceutical company. So
Mhm.
it's sometimes difficult to, even if you're ethically grounded and you're not being paid to say something. If I go to a medical conference and I'm being paid by someone else for the medical conference, but yeah, I have 5, 10 of the biggest pharmaceutical companies sponsoring, that I might not talk too much about the negative problems with the medications,
Mhm.
or, it can slant your view tremendously. Yeah. And I'm trying to be polite with
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, the statin problem.
Mm.
I, not too long ago, I said, let me read the package insert again. I always like to read them, but let me write the package insert. The landmark study they had to get the medication approved, it
Mhm.
did show benefit. 3% of their 10, I don't know what the number was a huge number, over 10,000 in each group, I think. 3% on the placebo group got the cardiac events they were tracking. And with one of the statins, 1.9%
Mhm.
got the events. So it worked, right? That means over the next 10 years, I need to put 100 patients on the statin. And instead of 3 of them getting heart attacks, 2 of them will get heart attacks. So 1.9%, but you're not a 1.9% person, right? So,
Mhm.
but basically, 3 heart attacks on the placebo group and 2 heart attacks on the medication group. Because it was 1.9 and 3%, you divide that is 36%. So
Mhm.
that particular drug, we have a reduction of 36% in
Mhm.
the heart attacks you're going to have if you put this amount of patients, right? When you explain to a patient that, yeah, there is a risk if you don't take this medication. And I was just watching your premiere that was happening just a moment ago
Mhm.
on YouTube. And you mentioned that the effect of the statins might not be just the lowering of the cholesterol, but uh, a little bit of an anticoagulant effect.
Mhm.
So, do they help? Uh, Maybe, but it probably is not because of the lowering of the cholesterol. The point is, some people might not be willing to take the chance. There's probably more chance of getting diabetes and Alzheimer's from using them.
Mm. Yeah, and that's
so,
understood. Yeah. Well, perfect.
so that's
Mm.
sometimes we don't see that. That even our continuing medical education is heavily influenced by what the pharmaceutical company wants. Used to be many years ago. I had an office for a few years, and you know, drug reps would love to come and talk to me, and always told me about all the great things of their medications. They really never talked too much about the negative side effects. Or if I wanted to find something negative, I would have to actually go and search it and read on my own because they were not going to point it out.
Mhm.
So even if you don't want to, sometimes you're influenced by the information you're getting. You have to consider the sources. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Dr. Vasquez, it was an absolute pleasure talking to you and seeing you again. It's great to have you on and hear your story, which I think will help a lot of people. Where can people find you and follow you? And are you active on social media, or do people get a hold of
So I don't have a big social media presence. I am starting to post some videos on my YouTube channel, so hopefully a few things will be coming.
you?
I already have a couple there. About 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, there was a live uh, for diabetes. Uh, we were fundraising for the American Diabetes Society that Dr.
Mhm.
Kenberry and others are trying to put together. So there was a panel that included Dr. Tony Hoffman, Dr. Eric Westman, Dr. Berry, and the very less well-known Dr. Vasquez. Uh, although I'm older than all of them, I've been a doctor longer, but I don't have much of a social media presence. But my channel at in YouTube is at the real Dr. Nelson.
Okay.
It's the real Dr. Nelson, the word doctor spelled out.
Okay. Perfect.
So
We'll put that in
I
the.
also have don't have a lot posted on Facebook. Uh, it's called Metabolically Healthy Again.
Okay.
Uh, hopefully, I'll be adding some stuff there.
And sorry, that was on Instagram.
I don't have Instagram
Okay.
yet.
And so where's the metabolically healthy again?
In Facebook.
Facebook. Perfect.
Yeah. Facebook.
Perfect.
Metabolically Healthy Again.
Perfect. Well, I'll put links for those in the description. People can find those below and see more of your work. And hopefully, you keep putting out more and more and more. It's always great to get more people putting out videos and talking about their experience, and especially when they're treating patients and saying, "Hey, this is the results I'm getting with my patients." So, thank you for doing that. I hope to see more and more of you in the
Thank
future.
you.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for watching. It's been an absolute pleasure, as always. Hope you found this useful and helpful. And if you did, please do hit the like button and leave a comment. And also share this out with anybody who you think would benefit from it. Thank you all, and we'll see you next time. Hey guys, thank you very much for taking the time out to listen to what I had to say. If you like it, then please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel and podcast. And if you're on YouTube, then please hit that little bell and subscribe, and that'll let you know anytime I have a new video out, which should be every week, if not more. And if you could share this with your friends, that would help me get the word out and let me know that you like what I'm doing. Thanks again, guys.